If you're working with someone who does financial planning work on your behalf, how evidence based is that person? We'll talk about that this week. This is Make Better Wealth Decisions, a podcast about financial blind spots, decision making, and how the reality of higher rates, global tensions, and tariff instability impact your investments. I'm your host, John DeGuy, a portfolio manager with Design Securities in Toronto. On Thursday, we had a discussion with Jason Watt, who is one of the premier educators of financial planners in Canada. And Jason was a wonderful guest because he's been through the wars and knows a lot about the back history of how the finance industry works in general and how the financial planning industry works in particular. One of the things that I have lamented, and I've written about this in my first book, The Professional Financial Advisor, I put out 4 editions of that book talking about how the business of giving financial advice was in the process of becoming a profession. We have doctors, dentists, lawyers, and accountants that all have professional designations, and that society accepts are professionals because they have a field of study with peer-reviewed exams and a demonstrated scope of competency that they have to be able to demonstrate proficiency in before they can practice in their field of endeavor. Giving financial advice is a bit different. Getting a license to sell a financial product, whether it be an insurance policy, a mutual fund, or a security, is simply just a question of passing one exam to pass one course that you get a license to be able to sell a product, but that's not necessarily enough. Similarly, if you want to be a professional financial planner, and financial planning is now becoming recognized as a profession across the country, belatedly, but nonetheless becoming recognized as a profession, you need to complete a longer field of study so that you can demonstrate proficiency to give qualified financial advice. The point in all this is that both selling financial products and doing financial planning are things that are, up until fairly recently, have not been regulated at all in terms of professional conduct. And as we move forward now in 2025, they are becoming seen as things that require a registration and a field of study that is more akin to what the more established professions have always had. So that's the good news. The next question that you should be asking whoever you work with, if you're working with someone, is how evidence-based are you? Because the history of giving financial advice is frankly rooted in a culture of sales. You have a license to sell something, and then oftentimes advisors will sell things that only had to be suitable. And the regulatory expectation of being suitable is that as long as it was not brazenly inappropriate, it would be appropriate enough. And I would say that bar is simply too low. So if you're looking for someone who can give you advice, if they're a portfolio manager, they will be held to a fiduciary standard. If they're a financial planner, they will be held to what I will call a de facto fiduciary standard, which means that they have to put the client's interest first. If they are simply licensed as a registrant to sell you something, all they have to do is make recommendations that are suitable. And frankly, the way that is interpreted these days is that there may as well not even be a standard, because virtually anything can be seen as suitable. As long as you're not a little old lady buying penny stocks, chances are the regulators will say, yeah, that was suitable enough for that client in that circumstance. The question that it then begs is, how evidence-based is the advice that you're getting? Hopefully, you will understand that if you're dealing with a doctor, the doctor will hopefully have done some research with regard to whatever medication is being prescribed. Did it go through the clinical trials? Does it do what it's supposed to do? What are the side effects? Are you aware of this? Hopefully, you will know that if you speak with an accountant, that accountant will be aware of changes to recent tax law to make sure that you're claiming as many deductions and claiming them properly, and that you're not missing anything in accordance with professional codes of conduct. The business of giving financial advice is just getting to the beginning, just getting to the starting line of that kind of peer review and evidence-based advice. There are dozens of papers that come out all the time with regard to what works better than others in terms of portfolio management. That's been going on for decades. But as was discussed with my guest, Jason Watt, it's only been fairly recently that people are doing meaningful peer-reviewed research with regard to financial planning. Does it make sense to take money out of your RIF sooner or later? What is the impact that that has on your entitlements and your benefits and so forth? Will you have your OAS clawed back, and what will that impact on your life expectancy? And if that in fact has an impact on your life expectancy, when should you be taking your CPP, and so on and so forth. So we're now getting to the point where instead of having someone give you a rule of thumb, We are now in a situation where there are a number of financial planning questions that can be answered empirically, where there is, in fact, a better answer. There may never be a best answer for anything that involves the social sciences, but there are things that are demonstrably true and that are directionally relevant. If you can make a decision based on better information, based on data, based on empirical evidence that has been proven and peer-reviewed, that would be a better way to go about virtually anything in life. So if you're working with someone, please ask to see the research, ask to see how that person came to that conclusion, and ask for a rationale behind whatever recommendation is being made. You might learn something yourself, and if nothing else, you might learn about how learned the person giving you advice really is. This podcast is not to be construed as offering specific investment advice. Please consult a qualified advisor before acting. My books, Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry and Bullshift, are available online. If you'd like to meet to discuss how the topics in this podcast affect you directly, please visit my website.